All right, welcome to the fourth and final game
Shit.
that was scheduled for here. I needed to delay because there wasn't actual room to do a multiplayer thing this week. We'll do that over the holiday. We will get Skydrift Infinity off the pocket someday. Not today, though. And so Final Fantasy V happened to be the thing I was playing, so why not review it? That being said, we did just do a topic of discussion a few weeks back about Final Fantasy V. So this isn't going to be really about the game itself, more about this new package. See also our review of Quake did recently. I can't directly compare it to any of the other Pixel remasters because this is actually the first one I picked up. This was the first one I was interested in picking up because, I might have made my thoughts there on this before, but since we're reviewing this, bears repeating. I don't particularly like the older, Final Fantasy 2, 3, the 8-bit games always, they feel a bit too dated and dusty to me. Plus, I do have the 3D versions of Final Fantasy 3 and 4. I know the original versions of these are different. I still didn't feel the need to pick those up. So, Final Fantasy V is the first one I picked up. Granted, I can already tell you that this is handling things differently than some of the because going like with Final Fantasy 1, the Pixel remaster, that's not quite a Pixel remaster. That's more a Pixel remake. Because
I think they do use a lot of the old style mechanics, like using actual spell slots, but I think they tweaked the hit point amounts and damage amounts and some of the other stuff.
They made sure that the spells weren't fucking useless.
Yes, I believe they did also. In fact, there's still that one spell that is still completely useless. I think it's anti. It was A-mute. It was A-mute in the original, and that was the one that worked. But there was no enemy in the entire game that inflicted the status that it cures. But I believe they made it so that the weapons that deal extra damage to a particular kind of enemy work.
Yeah. The original NES version of Final Fantasy was a kind of a bug-ridden mess. And they had to make sure that didn't occur again. And independent of that, the actual graphics of Final Fantasy 1 have been fairly revamped. They're not they don't look like the original graphics. They look like the 16-bit iteration. And on top of that, it's got a whole new suite of effects and like the water. The water looks a lot better. And that is the thing that's actually really carried over to Final Fantasy V. Final Fantasy V looks like Final Fantasy V for the most part.
The biggest change in the graphics, I think, is the breaking of the Super Nintendo color palette limitations. The sprites might have the same number of colors, but they are not the same colors.
No. The biggest difference is it's got the more advanced water, more advanced effects. When they cast lightning or sparks are flying, they are much more modern effects. But that's really the biggest difference in terms of the graphics here. other than this game being much more presentable in HD and preserving the original pixel flavor, which is what people actually wanted with a re-release of Final Fantasy V. Because this is not the first time Final Fantasy V got re-released on the PC or mobile, for that matter. Also, keep in mind, at time of recording, the Final Fantasy Pixel remasters are exclusive to mobile and Steam. No, we don't know why. Square Enix just decided to do that. Square Enix is a very baffling company with a lot of their decisions. That being said, if you don't think these games are eventually going to come to the consoles, I have a bridge to sell you. They will come. It's just, I'm willing to bet that they're waiting to have all of the 6 games ready to go to ship them on the PlayStation, the Switch. Getting back to the game itself here, the original PC version, mobile version, had revamped artwork that looked... There's no other way to say it. They looked awful. It looked ugly. They didn't get the proportions right.
The line width was a nightmare.
Yeah. It's generally considered to be a bad time. On that note, whatever problems with the fonts that they were having, that's been fixed. Or rather, they're using the typical Square Enix modern day font that you see in all of their games. Like the PC release of Chrono Trigger has this font, and other Square Enix games.
Well, if it ain't broke.
I'll be honest, I like the 16-bit font more, but yeah, it at least doesn't look ugly and hard to read like the original Pixel Remaster font did.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, I'm not sure if that font is still in Final Fantasy 1 or 2 or whatever. Final Fantasy V doesn't have it.
Mm-hmm.
And so your eyes aren't going to blister reading the game for hours on it. No.
Yeah, from what I can tell, looking at a comparison of sprite rips, they actually kept the designs not entirely, but mostly the same. The standing sprites are pretty much the same. Some of the posed sprites, like the spread legs magic casting poses, are a little bit more dynamic. But the biggest change in the character sprites, in battle sprites, is what I said already, is they smoothed out. Like the SNES only had a certain number of shades of brown, and they were not that close together. The shades of brown used in the new one are closer together for Bartz's hair. Or the Red Mage's hat, which in the original was basically 3 shades, yellow, red, and brown. And now it is red, slightly darker red, and very dark red.
Yeah. So, this is more of the platonic ideal of the Pixel Remaster. It's not 1-to-1, but it's a lot closer to the original than Final Fantasy 1 is.
The PlayStation 1 kind of is a little bit of heavier cake and eat it too, but this cake comes with the side of unforgivable load times.
Yeah. Point is, I think the graphical overhauls done to Final Fantasy V, it's perfectly fine. Okay, I don't think I've seen anyone complain about this particular game. But getting back to the 2 different Final Fantasy V's, so there is still merit to tracking down the original version that got released on PC in 2015, and that is because these Final Fantasy V's are based off of different versions. This Final Fantasy V is based off of the original Super NES. May actually be, I'm not sure if they're like using Super NES code or whatever, but this is the original Super NES version. The previous version, that was based off the advanced version. The Game Boy Advance, which had the extra content, the new jobs, the bonus dungeon with Uno in it.
Yeah, 4 extra jobs, one or more extra bonus dungeons. I think it was only 1 for 5, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, it was only 1, but it was probably the most plot relevant of the advanced series, because in Final Fantasy V, they spoke of this. The war 1,000 years ago being started by this guy named Uno, who does not show up in the Super NES version. He's just talked about. He's the one who originally harnessed the power of the void, but in doing that became mortal, and that was what felled him back in the day. And you get to fight him in the advanced version. Like, another thing to note in the 2 versions is the advanced version fixed or changed or closed off a bunch of stuff. The thing that really came to mind is blue magic. In the advanced version, blue magic was reflected. In the original Final Fantasy V, you could bypass reflect shields with blue magic. It's one of the things that made blue magic so potent in the original version. And you can do that here.
I think to some extent honestly, it's on a spell-by-spell basis, but yeah, like most blue magic at least, if not all.
Yeah, like Thousand Needles is getting through. And blue, with the right blue magic spells, you can wreak havoc, like few other things.
I mean, that's somewhat like, I understand that some of it is not as intended, but blue magic is supposed to be particularly good since it's particularly hard to get.
Yes. In fact, blue magic is a veteran's game. I will tell you that right now.
Like, they routinely get like 2 or 3 of the best healing and buff spells in the game or more, but you have to trick the enemy into doing that to you.
Sometimes it depends on the spell. I've already gotten the hardest blue magic spell to get in the game. That is level 5 Doom. Because
I mean, you need life 3 for that, but that's...
Or you need to desync the level gains. And
you need to desync the level of your party. I think they still have to have it cast on them, or does it work on anybody?
No, you do have to have it cast on them. Okay, here's another tip for getting blue magic. Make sure everyone is versed in the blue mage. Either have 4 blue mages or have everyone learn as their sub ability. That way you don't miss.
Mm-hmm.
It may be a tad inconvenient, but it's the best way to get blue magic outside of being able to control. And I will tell you, you're also not able to get all of the blue magic from control. Like, I couldn't get flamethrower from the prototype via control. I could get white wind, if I'm remembering correctly. But
yeah, white wind is control only.
Yeah, that's what I remember. So, my point is, if you're going for blue magic, you will probably be best served by casting a wide net. Anyway, another big change to the game is movement. Since we are in modern times, not everything has to be fucking tile or grid based. I mean, obviously, the whole graphics and implementation of everything is still tile based, but the movement isn't. You can move in 8 directions now. It's awkward. I'm gonna be honest.
Wait a second, you mean diagonals exist? What? What
Yeah.
is this sorcery?
Yeah, it feels weird because I'm so used to like Final Fantasy games from this time being cardinal directions only. More of a problem, and this is not the only version of Final Fantasy V that suffered from this, is it's got a run button.
Oh man.
Now you might be wondering why I'm bringing this up, but I'll
Wasn't
tell
this
you.
one of the games that had like a literal accessory you could equip that was a run button?
A job.
Oh, that too, yeah.
The Thief has the run feature. And here's the thing. The run feature has been doubled in speed.
So if you use the run button while being in the thief job, it's just, oh hey, I'm going really, really, really fast.
And it's nigh uncontrollable.
Now is this like run fast in the overworld or run like escape and counter?
No,
run in the overworld and in dungeons. Dungeons
dungeons
notably,
only.
Yeah,
dungeons only.
Dungeons which notably can have damage floors and encounters that happen on specific squares, and because this game also has a job class whose primary feature is not being affected by damage floors, if I remember correctly.
It's finding traps. Like if I'm, but yeah, like so when you run at thief speed, it can become nigh uncontrollable. Not the most annoying thing because at the end of the day, this is an RPG. But you know, here's the thing: the controls for the at least Final Fantasy V here have always been a bit slippery. Like I will give them credit; the game feels like Final Fantasy V from back in the day. That's not necessarily a good thing either, because I've always found the controls of Final Fantasy V to be a bit slippery, and adding extra slippery on it makes for some bad tidings. Or some, oh, I did not mean to go down that passage kind of deal. Once again, it's not the biggest thing in the world, but it is a thing. Also added, and I believe this is a consistency across all of the Pixel remasters, because I remember seeing in like Final Fantasy 1, is the auto battle is here. You just hit the button and you'll do okay. The auto battle is not the most robust thing in the universe, and you got to be careful with this because it'll be based off of the last moves you made. So if you fucking cast, say, Aqua Rake, which takes like 30 MP, you're going to be doing that over and over again. Or if you use the Phoenix Down and you have the auto battle, that character will always use Phoenix Down. Yeah.
I'm not saying everything should have like a rotation system like Metabots has, because that's way too complicated, but
okay.
I feel like repeating the same action over and over is probably going to result in some issues.
And yeah, there are some issues. I'll be honest, like if you want a game that got this kind of thing right, it's Phantasy Star 4, because that led to that had what they called the macro system, because you could actually program the individual actions for each character and have that as a macro, which is that's much more complex, but it's much more robust and has less issues for the same result. Let's see. The music. So, yeah. I'd say the music has been given the biggest overhaul of the entire package. It's all the same Final Fantasy V tracks, but here's the thing. They're much better now. Or rather, they are not constrained by the limits of the Super Nintendo. Now, how you might feel about that is probably going to be down to an individual taste, but to boil it down to the barest bits here, they're using real instruments for these tracks now. And they can also have things like the Wind Shrine track that has a guy singing in the background now. Just a lot of stuff here that they could not do on the Super NES, either because of the limits of time or the particular quirks of the Super NES's music. That being said, I do not recall seeing the original versions of those tracks in the game. And that is a missed opportunity. Since the optimal option is always, having both. But they did not feel like doing that. And once again, this is in line with the other Pixel remasters. I know, the music has been overhauled in all of the other ones, and I'm going to presume Final Fantasy VI is going to have that as well. And I think here. And yeah, I think that is about it for what is new and different, or what is the same with this game.
Well, what's the same is, I think you said that they also didn't fix all of the bugs.
Yeah, or they, which is going to be interesting to see for Final Fantasy VI, because there is an exploit that I am really fucking mad that they changed in Final Fantasy VI Advance, and that is the Vanish X Zone exploit.
Vanish X Zone or Vanish Doom.
Yes.
So Vanish Doom or Vanish X Zone is supposed to do a thing. If you make someone invisible, they can't be missed by magic. That is supposed to work on death. The thing that it wasn't supposed to do was remove immunity to death if it was there. So, right. You could do it on bosses.
Yeah, I know.
Supposed to
I
be
use them on
bosses.
Like by Rex Soul.
Yeah. Or Doom Gaze, but make sure you use death on him, because if you use X Zone, you won't get the Magicite he drops.
Right.
Also, notably, Final Fantasy VI had one half of its entire defensive system not work. It used the magic block stat to calculate both your chances to not be hit by physical attacks and, as intended, your chances to not be hit by magic. This notably made several accessories that buff evasion, and also the entire status condition of blind do absolutely nothing.
Those are duly noted, but once again, that is Final Fantasy VI. This is Final Fantasy V.
Right,
so,
I know.
Anyway, so I suppose that gets us to pricing. Final Fantasy V, the Pixel Remaster, right now is still 20% off and will be until November 30th, where it will revert to its normal price of $17.99. It's currently $14.39. As far as, is the game worth it for $15, to $18? Of course it is. But is this Pixel Remaster worth it? Yes. This is what the original release version should have been, and not that eyesore that we got.
For a PC version, you mean? Yeah.
Yes. I am talking about specifically the Pixel Remaster or the mobile version, if you will, because this is on Android and iOS. Though I would personally, I wouldn't really play this with a touchscreen. Well, again, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, but with how slippery things feel and with the loss of articulation, especially if you have the active time on, because speed is the key there. It's kind of why I will pick the first thing, because you're on a clock.
Yeah, speed is notable in this game. There are time segments.
But that being said, overall, yeah, it is a wonderful remastering of a classic game. Now, I don't think I've seen anyone complain about it. I haven't seen a lot of chatter on this particular game, probably because it's the fifth one. And also, Final Fantasy V is not one of the lesser titles, but because of its more turbulent release history, it's not as prominent as like Final Fantasy IV is, or 6. But yeah, hell, I picked this game up at like fucking $60 basically back in the day, or $50. However much it was in goddamn 1999, I paid for it. And here's the thing, I had played the game before. Now, I had actually played the game first on an emulator. I still bought this because, the game needed support. And I guess it worked because, we keep getting Final Fantasy V, obviously not as much as, like 4 or 1 or, what have you, but still. Anyway, any other questions, comments, or concerns over Final Fantasy V here?
Not too much. Were there any interesting translation notes?
There was a reference there that I noted, but I've forgotten what it was.
Because there have been some changed translations in it before, I believe. So I was just curious.
Yeah, nothing coming to mind, but it's not the goddamn PlayStation 1 version. Like they're not. They didn't even do homages to that. I do. Like they didn't have the Wyverns be Wyvern. Because like Final Fantasy 4 and 6 will be forever tied to some fucking localization choices. Like,
but 5 wasn't localized into English at all until later than most of them. So
right. What I'm getting at is no, Final Fantasy 4 will never get away from Spoony Bar. It's always going to be there. Final Fantasy.
It's also 6, not wrong exactly.
Right. I'm just saying, it's so mimetic. Mm-hmm. If they wanted to change it, they couldn't.
Another one is Garland knocking you all down.
That fucking showed up in Final Fantasy Origin trailer.
Uh-huh.
And Jack Garland. What the fuck? Anyway, or Final Fantasy VI, Kefka's Son of a Submariner line.
Yeah, Sandworm works too, but yeah.
Still kind of locked in on that. Mm-hmm. Not as much as Spoony, but still, it's there.
He has to say son of a something.
Yeah. We'll see what happens with the 6, what they have. Will they go with Submariner, Sandworm? Who knows? We don't even have a date for 6 yet. But I'm presuming it's coming early next year. Like, unless they're dropping it in December. Anyway, but yeah, Final Fantasy V, the Pixel Remaster, go buy it. And yeah, that'll about do it for the Fragments of Silicon reviews. The week ahead, easy one this week. We are off. At least for the week. We have no Wednesday show. We have no Friday show. Obviously, Thanksgiving week. I know not everyone in the world celebrates that, but we do at this time of year.
Yeah, I'm gonna be out of state on Friday, so
yeah. Well, that's not really a concern. So, this is why we take Thanksgiving off, because this is Thanksgiving and Christmas. These are the two holidays when we usually have actual plans, as opposed to like the 4th of July or Halloween or Arbor Day. We tend to not have plans for those holidays. So, no Wednesday show, no Friday show. We will be back next Sunday with a new slate of Fragments Silicon reviews. And I suppose I can give out the list here, since I won't be able to give it out anywhere else. We'll be reviewing the games Negative Nancy, Aldred Knight of Honor, Spooky Chase, and Running Water. And until next week, I shall wish you good gaming.